What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, March 11th, 2019, getting into the middle of the month here, start of a brand new week. We have got a lot to talk about. It's a very busy news day, and the phone lines are open. 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. So today is the anniversary of the Fukushima disaster, and it's also the birthday of the What Really Happened website. Today is the day, all those years ago, when I posted that first article about Vince Foster on what was then my animation resume website, which led to my blacklisting and decades of vilification and abuse and so forth. So going to get a little cupcake with a candle in it this afternoon, I guess. All right, let's get into it. Obviously, down in Venezuela, they are now in the fourth day of their massive, virtually nationwide blackout. Dozens are reported dead in the hospitals. They were on ventilators, breathing machines. The hospitals have now run out of gas for their backup emergency generators. And so it's an ugly situation. And of course, the U.S. media is saying, oh, well, it's the failure of the Maduro government to maintain the electric system here. But not many people are buying that here right now. And I'm seeing a lot of articles from places like Global Research up in Canada, which does really good things, say this is very obviously a cyber attack on Venezuela. And one of the reasons is that they'll be on the verge of getting the system reconnected back up and running, and then another attack comes in, and another attack, and another attack after that. So this is definitely cyber war, and it's causing a lot of suffering and a lot of death. And of course, Guido is out there calling for massive protests. See, it's the fault of Maduro. No, it isn't. Venezuela is being targeted. And there is a bit of an object lesson here for all you to take note of. Because if we go to war with a military peer like Russia or China, and they pop off an EMP weapon, we're going to be going through exactly what the people of Venezuela are going through right now. So please make the appropriate preparations to deal with that. There's no way of knowing when this is going to end, because apparently every time Venezuela gets their power system about ready to go back online, it gets taken down again. And meanwhile, Marco Rubio just thinks this is all funny as all get out. He tweeted out this Twitter image saying, "We've found the cause of Venezuela's blackout," and it's got a picture of Godzilla breathing fire on a power station. And I don't know, if it was his mother was on a ventilator in a Caracas hospital, maybe he'd think differently. But he just thinks this is all great sport here, and it does illustrate the mentality of the neocon warmongers here. Okay, other reports are saying that basically the blackout has hit 80% of the country, and so, of course, to nobody's surprise, 80% of the internet is now offline, because the internet, the routers and everything, they're powered by the electric system. But it's a massive, massive attack, and it reveals the capability that the United States has built up to cyber attack other countries. And I'm sure other countries are paying very, very close attention and wondering, could this be done to them? And the answer, unfortunately, at this point is, yeah, it could. All right, now, Patrick Henningsen, who's a journalist and founder of 21st Century Wire, is saying that the reason for the aggression against Venezuela at this particular moment in time is to knock it out of the oil market. As you know, the United States has been developing its oil infrastructure, not much of the other infrastructure, but the oil infrastructure, and is now capable of exporting more oil than Saudi Arabia. And they want the world market all for themselves. And they can't really cost compete with Venezuela, so let's just wreck the country, and then we can have the oil prices go up, and the oil companies will get very, very rich. And confirming this observation, we have Elliot Abrams is out there demanding that other countries stop trading oil with Venezuela. His latest warning is to India, but apparently he's been giving the same warning to other countries. Don't you dare do business with Venezuela. You do business only with us, acting like a gangster. That's a nice country you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it, is really what they're saying here. Now, on the other side of this, we have a comment from Russia saying that they will defend their Venezuela oil interests in, quote, the toughest way possible. So war is coming to Venezuela, and I would not be surprised at all if Russia's cyber warriors were on their way down there right now to help deal with this cyber attack. Now, Russia is the staunchest supporter and ally of Maduro, and they have, major economic interests in Venezuela. They've poured billions of dollars into Venezuela in the form of loans and oil investments. Russia's state-controlled oil giant Rosneft has extended $6 billion of loans to Venezuela's state oil firm PDVSA. They're not going to walk away from that. So we could be looking at war with Russia. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And I hope you're all wide awake despite having to get up an hour earlier today. The Black Alliance for Peace is heading down to Venezuela. And apparently this is a propaganda move here, because this Black Alliance is at the forefront of efforts to uncover the truth and spread the word about basically white supremacy. And this appears to be another attempt to manipulate public opinion against Maduro. So it's a very, very tense situation down there. However, it may be that Iran, rather than Venezuela, will be the location of the next U.S. shooting war. This is coming from Bob Dreyfus for Tom Dispatch. And apparently, the U.S. government is reckless enough to turn the Cold War with Iran into a hot one. And they're talking about different options, military options that they could do. Pardon me. And a lot of this is driven purely by politics. We know the economic dimensions of this, but if Netanyahu's leadership in Israel is in jeopardy, he could launch a war in Syria against Iranian targets, and that could escalate. So all these soldiers, they're going to be the sacrificial lambs from an Israeli false flag mission, claiming it was Syrian or Russian troops who did the deed. And, to win his election and stay out of jail is basically what it is. So there are 4 scenarios which could be played out here. You have a potential Israeli strike against Iran, potential Syrian strikes against Israel in the Golan, or potentially direct U.S. strikes against Iran. Earlier today, Claire and I were talking, and she made this observation. She said, maybe it was always successfully hidden from us. But she can't remember a time in her life, which is now long, where the world just seemed so crazy and so chaotic, with so many different countries on the verge of wars or actually in wars. And I had to agree with her. I don't think it's ever been like this before, and it just feels so dangerous right now and so fragile. Like one mistake and things could just really spiral out of control. Up in Afghanistan, U.S. airstrikes against the village of Nasir Kil in Afghanistan's Nangarhar province destroyed 2 houses that belonged to the village's only doctor and his brother, and killed both of them along with their families, a total of 13 civilians in all. 2 men, their wives, 9 children. And the provincial government had claimed a Taliban commander was also killed. There's no confirmation. Now, NATO is confirming the airstrikes took place, but did not confirm on the civilian deaths. You know, we don't want to trouble your little minds with all these dead civilians. I mean, really. And emphasized the attacks were self-defense. Now, how blowing up a doctor's house counts as self-defense isn't really very clear. But NATO is saying they meant to hit a Taliban operation center. Little bit of an oopsie there. They're not picking their targets very, very carefully, okay? All right, this is an important story, and I would hope cooler minds in the administration, among the war hawks, Pentagon, would pay attention to it. The RAND Corporation, as you know, is this think tank. They've been around for a very, very long time. They get all these government contracts to conduct these studies, and they were, not too long ago, handed a contract to run World War III simulations against Russia and China. And they ran dozens and dozens of them. And their conclusion was that basically the U.S. gets its rear end handed to it. So that despite all the money that has been spent, the RAND Corporation is saying the United States would lose against Russia or China. And of course, somewhere along there, they would turn the keys in those little missile silos here. And it turns out the reason for this is all this high-tech communication, this networking that the U.S. has been investing so much in and basing their training on. And as we already saw up in the Black Sea with the USS Donald Cook, it's easy to shut it all down. And that's where the U.S. is vulnerable. You know, all this stuff works great in training and simulation and demonstrations, but in a real-world battle scenario, it can really get shut down. All right, we're going to take a phone call here from Frank in North Carolina. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was going to caution you against eating the red icing.
Against
eating the red icing, the icing on top of the cupcake.
Ah, okay. How did you know it was going to be red?
Well, just in case.
Oh, okay.
It was red.
All right.
Just a couple observations, though. I understand that this weekend Trump was engaged in some campaign fundraising.
Yes.
So, I guess he plans to run for president again. So I guess that kind of confirms that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing was, I notice in my circles that, people I listen to, they seem to be kind of taking off the governor, or they're not holding back anymore. They're becoming very vocal in their displeasure with Trump's stupidity. And these are people that have been apologists up until recently. They've really been holding back, even though they were dissatisfied and very displeased. They've been kind of holding back and trying to make excuses for him. And I notice that seems to be changing, and I expect it's going to probably get worse. But anyway, that's just a couple observations I had.
Well, Trump, I actually got an email the other day saying, how dare you turn on Trump? He's, you underestimate him. He's got a plan. Well, he's 2 years into his term of office, and from where I sit, he's proving to be a very weak leader. I think he wanted to be president just so he could say he was president. We're hearing from multiple sources now that John Bolton is basically running our foreign policy, and that's not supposed to be Bolton's job. That's the president is supposed to decide that foreign policy. And, he dropped the ball on vaccine safety. He dropped the ball on honest elections. He's thrashing around on immigration. And to be very honest, the only way I would support Donald Trump in 2020 is if Hillary steps in again, and it looks like she's going to do that.
Oh, really? I thought I was hearing that she wasn't.
Well, we went through this kind of a weird situation last week where she said on TV she wasn't going to run in 2020, and everybody started popping the champagne corks and getting out the Pringles. And 24 hours later, she came back and said, no, I haven't really made a decision. And God, I don't believe how everybody just overreacted to my saying that. And now she's saying she's going to wait to see what's in the Mueller report before making her final decision. But
well, yeah, you can't believe anything. You can't believe anything any politician says, because they usually do end up doing the opposite of whatever they say they're going to do. But I saw a poll the other day on the news, just maybe Friday evening, that Joe Biden seemed to be top guy in some poll, followed
Yes.
by Bernie Sanders, followed by Pocahontas.
Yeah, and Hillary was way down at the bottom. I saw that poll as well, and I'm delighted to see it. And again, we're going into another election year where we're going to have to vote for the lesser of several evils, which is still evil, and it's a stupid way to run a country. But I really do not want to see Hillary Clinton in that Oval Office. The Clintons have been a curse on not just the country as a whole. They've been a curse on our lives for all the quarter of a century now. And I really don't want Hillary in the Oval Office. Trump, again, is a disappointment. I'm waiting to see who's going to step out from the GOP field as a possible primary challenger for him. But given that the White House Communications Director just resigned his position to become a senior advisor to the Trump campaign, it looks to me like the GOP, they're going to basically throw behind Trump and run him again in 2020. But if the Democrats can come up with a serious candidate, and as creepy as he can be sometimes, Joe Biden is leading in the polls, Trump could find himself a single-term president, unless he starts accomplishing something substantive in the next slightly less than 2 years now. I know they've been trying to groom Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a contender, but she keeps slipping up, stepping on her own feet, and I don't think she's going to make it to the primaries.
I'd really like to see Biden run. I think that would at least provide quite a bit of entertainment as we watch the country slide further and further into the abyss. And I better just leave it at that. Anyway. Thank you.
Well, I don't get entertainment value out of seeing the company slide into the abyss. I would have preferred not seeing that. But obviously, as part of the process of a Soviet Union-style collapse, this is what we have to endure. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to Jim in Chicago. Jim, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, today I was reading Trump's budget proposal.
Yes.
And let me tell you, it is very much anti-American. There is nothing in there that's going to help the average American. There's nothing about infrastructure. There's nothing about more housing for the homeless. Nothing about maybe cutting back on the student loans. Nothing about any help from the drug company or anyone else to help the average person. So it's very much anti-American. Most of the money is
it's
going
pro-war.
to defense.
It's a war budget. He's slashed domestic spending, and he's thrown all that money onto the war machine.
Yeah, it's going toward the defense contractors and other things. So, I don't know if people really know this or they don't care to know. It doesn't matter if you supported Trump, you still support the man. There's nothing in this budget that's going to help you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a war budget. And
right, and especially as far as the infrastructure, which we definitely need, there's nothing in there.
No, there isn't.
So, I didn't support the man. I don't like the man. But, at least you can throw Americans some crumbs. He won't even do that.
No, it's a war budget. It is. Anyway, Jim, we got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
Sure.
We'll be right back after these few words. Okay, aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, I have to stress going on in. This next story appears to have emerged from the Israeli media, like the Jerusalem Post, World Israel News. Okay? But the claim is that Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Mikdad has sent a message through the head of the United Nations Truth Supervision Organization, Christine Lund, a notification that if the IDF does not leave the Golan Heights, Syria will attack Israel. Now, earlier we were talking about the need for Netanyahu to stir up some trouble in that part of the world because he's facing stiff competition in his election, and if he loses that election, he's looking at criminal indictments. I would have been a little bit more trusting of this report if the United Nations had made some kind of an announcement, but so far I haven't seen anything. So is this laying the propaganda foundation for a false flag where Israel will blow something up inside Israel and say, oh, this is a Syrian attack, and the war will be off and running? Because Netanyahu is desperate. He's in a panic. Desperate people do desperate things. And people at that level of politics and corruption, they don't care how many people get killed, as long as they get what they want here. Alrighty. Apparently, a prominent security expert is warning of the U.S. attempts to establish relocation camps for the ISIS terrorists and their family members who have fled from eastern Syria in the western deserts of Al-Anbar. And apparently the U.S. is planning to resettle these terrorists in western Iraq. Of course, Iraq hasn't apparently been consulted on this. But apparently Hazam al-Bawi was quoted in the Arabic language al-Ma'ul, I'm not even going to try that one, news website, as saying on Friday that the U.S. aims to gather the ISIS terrorists in the western deserts of Iraq after withdrawal from the Baghuz region in Syria. So the U.S. is still out there trying to move people around there and acting like they're in charge of Syria and Iraq, even though both Syria and Iraq want the United States to go. More about Iraq. There's a development there as well. Once again, U.S. Army helicopters are rescuing ISIS commanders, and these U.S. helicopters helped these commanders escape Raqqa province. That included 6 helicopters flying in Al Rafadin region in Al Tabaka town in southwestern Raqqa. And apparently, one of the reasons for this is that these ISIS commanders may have intelligence that would be seriously embarrassing to the United States government were they to be captured by Syria. Okay, you're going to love this one. This is multiculturalism. This story came out of the Daily Mail, for what it's worth, and our property in the Quran, and basically described her interpretation of the Quran as justification for the rape and murder of these Yazidi women taken prisoners as sex slaves, saying because the Muslim holy book defines prisoners of war as property, they can be treated as objects. When she was actually pressed for details, this woman replied that she really didn't know much about the Quran. It was just something she'd been told. So the propaganda is just out there on both sides. Alrighty. 90 refugee children have died due to unfavorable conditions of the Hasaka camp run by the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is one of the U.S. allies or U.S. supported groups in Syria. And apparently there are reports that some people were being tortured. Again, there's apparently been waves of protests over the lack of facilities in the camp. There's been what is being described as a terror attack over in Egypt, over in the Sinai, and apparently there was an officer and soldiers killed in an attack on Egypt's military in the Sinai Peninsula. That happened on Saturday. It caused 15 casualties, while 7 of the suspected Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIS or ISIL, they were killed. Everybody is fighting everybody. There's been a video released of the Houthis in Yemen successfully destroying Saudi-led coalition vehicles in Jizan. Apparently these vehicles were like bulldozers, and they were trying to basically build up fortifications in the key area on the Saudi-Yemeni border, and they got hit with anti-tank missiles. Again, we're looking at a politician who's desperate to be reelected. In this case, it's Poroshenko. And is he ready to start a war to stay in office? Maybe. So we're looking at this story. This came out of Fakti.org, where the president of the Ukrainian General Staff, Viktor Musenko, has declared that Russia is preparing to attack Ukraine. More about this when we come back from our commercials, and we have a caller waiting on the line. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I want to finish up on this story. And again, this may be something that's being driven by a national leader who simply wants a war to win an election. So the president of the Ukrainian General Staff, Viktor Musenko, is claiming Russia is getting ready to attack Ukraine from the north, east, and south. Now, he's saying all of this without offering any evidence that Russia was ending the formation of military formations that, together with special units, would make up the bulk of the invading forces. But again, to me, this looks like an attempt to just stir up Ukrainian patriotism and saying we must stay with Poroshenko. He's saved us from Russia. But I'm not buying it. Why would Russia invade Ukraine? Doesn't need to. There's another follow-up story here. This is from Fort Russ, and the former Minister of the Economy of Ukraine, Vladimir Lanovoy, is saying that Poroshenko is already preparing to leave Ukraine in the event of his defeat in the elections, which are scheduled for the end of this month. And if he loses his election, leaving the country is the only way to avoid criminal prosecution. So he's going to have to go someplace without extradition. I'm sure the United States will just take him on in and give him a nice home someplace, out there in some retirement community or something like that. Okay, we got a caller waiting on the line. Pat in Texas. Aloha, Pat. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Well, I think that people are looking at the whole story about Venezuela. Iran and Russia both want Venezuela. And we have an interest down there. Well, at one time we did, but we probably let it go. But we don't want those people on our shore, that close to our shore, because Venezuela's been doing maneuvers for war out there in the Gulf for years and years with F-16s or F-15s or whatever. And so they still have all that. They still have all that military. And that's really too close to us for somebody that hates us. And Chavez hated us.
Pat, the United States has been trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela for decades. Wouldn't it make sense that they would basically keep their military prepared to hold off a possible invasion? I mean, look at the United States. They're invading here, they're invading there, they're invading everywhere. Every nation on earth knows the United States has become this belligerent rogue, and I'm sure they're all dusting off their military as quickly as they can.
No, that's not the way I see it, because Chavez kept telling all his people to be, afraid of us, because the Bible says the wicked flee when no one pursues. But all those years that they've had our oil wells that they stole from, and they thought George Bush, he kept telling them George Bush is going to attack us because he thought he deserved to be attacked. But we didn't. George Bush smiles and they cuss him and all that. If we wanted them, we could have took them. We didn't like Grenada under Reagan. We don't want them.
Well, Grenada was just an absolute pushover here. And, at one point, the United States did succeed in ousting Hugo Chavez in a coup d'etat, but it only lasted 2 days because the Venezuelan people like their leaders. And I think we're probably going to see they're going to rally around Maduro. They're going to deal with the hardships of the blackout. I mean, Guido promised Mike Pence that half of the Venezuelan military would support him. But right now, more than 99% of the military are still backing Maduro.
Well, you can't believe the vote. Do you believe the vote in Iraq when everybody knew that if they didn't vote for Gaddafi that did end up dead, or somebody in their family be in a hole in the ground.
Pat, did you look at what Gaddafi did for Libya? I mean, he raised the literacy rate, the standard of living. He built that magnificent waterworks project that was greening up the entire country. He got rid of that private central bank that was keeping all the Libyan people enslaved to debt, and he set up a state central bank and a value-based currency called the gold dinar that was so attractive the rest of Africa wanted to use it. You know, Gaddafi did a really good job for the Libyan people.
Not his own people. Our soldiers went out there and gave them all electricity that never had electricity. All they did in his hometowns and where all his 70 castles were. I mean, he
Wait a minute, 70 castles? 20%. Where are you getting your information? Gaddafi had one official. Listen to me, Pat.
I have a friend.
Yeah, you have a friend. Pat, listen to me. Pat, listen to me. Gaddafi had one official residence. He actually himself preferred to live in a tent on the grounds in the traditional manner. And, you know, I think whatever your friend is, they're trying to feed you propaganda to get you to go along with supporting the invasion of another country.
No, he was in the military, and they were living in one of the castles. The military was living in one of them. He confirmed all this stuff that everybody should know. I don't understand why it's so hidden right now. But
I think because it's unbelievable, and it sounds like propaganda. And Pat, I'm going to let you go now. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Pat, I don't know how old you are, but you need to really, if you have a computer, do some research. Go on YouTube, type in Libyan Water Project.
Yeah.
I have friends who were from Libya, and Gaddafi, the dude lived in a tent, you know, okay?
Yeah.
Like, they had free health care over there.
Yeah.
Free education.
Yep.
And you know who ruined it? Your country, your government. Your government.
Yeah.
Your government ruined Iraq. Your government ruined Libya. Your government with Saudi Arabia, Pat. Saudi Arabia, that's your friend. Them and Israel ruined Yemen. Right?
Yep.
I mean, come on. Syria, arming jihadis. You know, Pat, I hate to break this to you, but back in the late 70s, early 80s, your own government armed and trained bin Laden, and they were called moderate rebels. And, you know, we all know how that works out. So you need to really do some basic research. Your country is an empire, and it's going around the world like it's doing now in Venezuela to steal people's stuff, and that's it. And
well, it's not just to do that, but you made a valid point here. The government of Libya was giving out free health care to the Libyan people. We certainly don't have free health care in this country. They were giving out free education to the Libyan people, raising their literacy and their educational standards. We don't have free education in this country, and that's setting a bad example. The U.S. government doesn't want the American people saying, hey, instead of spending all of this vast sums of tax money on foreign wars, give it back to us. You know, we deserve something back for all that money that we give you. The same thing was true of Venezuela. The reason they hated Hugo Chavez so much was that he was spending Venezuela's money on the Venezuelan people. And again, it was setting a bad example because, you know, the Western so-called democracies, you know, have this model of, you know, you pay for everything, inflated prices. And the model there is to just suck all the wealth out of the people and keep them dumbed down. I mean, Libya never had Common Core. Venezuela never had Common Core. And even Bill Gates is now saying Common Core was an absolute disaster.
And Mike, I want to remind Pat, where is ISIS getting the Stinger and TOW missiles from? A Stinger is an anti-aircraft missile, and a TOW is an anti-tank missile. They're just falling into their hands. Your own government has been giving these groups these weapons and using them as a proxy army. And it goes back to the Romans and the British and the French. It's the same playbook. And I know Pat probably don't want to hear that because, you know, somebody told her, oh, this. Listen, our military is basically now a mercenary force.
Yes, well, kind of always has been.
Yeah, like since the fruit, what was it? What was in Guatemala? The fruit, United Fruit.
Yeah, United Fruit. Oh, they were all over South America. Yeah. They were in Cuba.
Yeah.
And you know, if Pat does know how to use a computer, one of the first things she should look at is that treatise by Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, War is a Racket. I mean, this is a guy who joined the Marines. He worked his way up through the ranks. He became one of the most respected commanders in the Marine Corps history, and always followed his orders, never questioned. Then when he retired, he sat down and he wrote, and he said, this is what's really been going on, and it is an eye-opener.
And I just want to tell Pat one more thing. George Washington, he fought against the empire. It was called the British Empire. Remember that?
Yep.
If you do some research on that, we're doing the same thing what the British did, basically. You know, I mean,
I'm
not
sure that came out the way you intended it to do. Are you talking about the independent media or the U.S. government?
No, I'm talking about the U.S. government, like how the British Empire would overthrow governments and put their puppets in. And we are an empire. We're following in the footsteps of other empires.
Yes, we are.
That's it.
And we're headed for the same fate.
Yeah. And Mike, real quick on Trump, I just want to say, you know, I supported him when I voted for him, obviously, and, you know, a part of me still supports him, but I can't vote for him anymore. I just don't like what I see now. And Mike, and I thought about this. If Trump really cared about us, the regular people, because he keeps saying that, he would have gave us the tax cuts first. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He didn't.
Yeah. A lot of people are getting a shock now that tax season is here and realizing all those tax cuts went to the corporations and the ultra wealthy. And a lot of people are seeing their tax, especially in the middle class, their tax bills actually went up this year.
If everything was hunky-dory, how come we only had 20,000 jobs in February? You know?
Yep.
Nothing is as it seems. It's all about perception.
Yep.
All right, Mike. Have a good rest of the show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Ed in Florida. Aloha, Ed. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, about Smedley Butler. He's one of the two Americans who rose from the ranks to win 2 Congressional Medal of Honors. I believe he also had the Distinguished Service Cross and the Distinguished Service Medal. So he was an American hero, one you'll never see today. But the reason why I called was the Gun Control Act of 2019, that it looks like it's going to pass the Republican-controlled Senate. You've got Bubble Boy Rubio who's going to vote for it. Chucky Schumer, the Democrat, has always advocated gun control, even back as far as I can remember in the 1990s. And there are at least Rick Scott, another Republican who, from the state I live in, definitely, has changed from pro-gun to anti-gun in the last 6 months to a year. So I kind of wonder how many Republicans are actually going to vote. So far, by the count, there's about 48 Republicans and 48 Democrats and at least 4 Republicans who will vote for gun control measures. And what this does is actually, it strips you of your Second Amendment right. There is no, actually, it's just gun forfeiture. I mean, think about it. There is no restitution, no notification, no right to an attorney, no due process. There's nothing. All it takes is a disgruntled ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, a neighbor, anyone. We have that law here in Florida now, so you have to be very careful what you say, especially when you call on shows like this, Mike.
Yeah.
Because all it takes is a neighbor who says, okay, that's not across the street. Guess what? You lose your weapons. And now that I think it's just a matter of gun registration to gun confiscation. It happened in Bolshevik Russia in the early 1920s, happened in Nazi Germany, happened in the 70s in Cambodia. Look at the state of Western Europe today, because these people cannot control, the Muslim hordes, which if they were armed, Western Europe would not be falling today. And look at England. There's serious talk about them banning knives because they've taken all the guns away in the early 90s, mid-90s. Now it's gone from gun violence to knife violence, and they want to take knives away. I mean, when you look at the stats, more people are killed with hammers than actually semi-assault weapons. So it's kind of ludicrous to think that, just because you take knives away, people are going to stop killing each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. People who reach that point, they're going to use whatever's there. In fact, this is part of the culture of Great Britain, but there are a lot of people every year who are blinded and seriously maimed by having a beer mug shoved in their face. And I think it was about 6 years ago, Britain actually passed a law outlawing glass beer mugs, and now they're all plastic.
It's just, you don't know whether, I don't know whether to laugh or cry after hearing that one, because, you go for a cold beer and the last thing you want to taste is plastic, you want glass, right? I mean, it just doesn't taste like beer. But, then again, in England, I mean, it's not the country that, that great generation that defended against Nazi Germany, they're pretty much gone.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the Battle of Britain, those heroic British fighters who fended off the Nazis for a good few months until they decided they weren't going to win the air war over England. So what happened? I just don't know what's happened to the English people, the European people in general, whether you're an American or from New Zealand, Australia, Canada. I mean, we just allow politicians to dictate to us how we live our lives. I was never asked if I wanted gun control. I was never asked if I wanted millions of illegals in this country who can't speak the language, who are probably 20 points IQ lower than I am.
Well, you just hit an important topic there, because you're talking about, where are the Americans of the World War II generation? Where are the Europeans and the British of the World War II generation? This globalist influx of all these other cultures is diluting the national identity of the indigenous people. And they don't look in a mirror and see themselves anymore as they once were.
No, my grandparents were born in the 1890s. They came over here around 1910 or so. Now, my grandmother went back to Germany for the last time in 1973, and it changed then. I'd hate to see what her heart would be broken if she saw what our country looked like and what it is today. I mean, I think my grandmother died before, and my grandparents died before Germany became the third world nation, because we're living to see that now here in America.
Yes.
And going back to gun control, once they do take our guns away, it's just a matter of how many people will comply. Good 90% probably will turn their weapons in. I mean, your semi-automatics, your pistols, anything over 5 rounds in a magazine, and it'll be like the 1996 Gun Registration Act, which was, in my opinion, unconstitutional. But then again, we have a lot of laws in quotes that are unconstitutional today, Mike, that would have been unthinkable 50 years ago.
Well, the bottom line is the federal government is becoming afraid of the general population. They're looking at the yellow vest protests and they're getting nervous. Okay, Ed, got to let you go.
One last question, Mike. One last statement. We need to get rid of all the special interest groups from APAC all the way down to Big Pharma.
Okay, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones. We got a lot of callers on the line here today, and we're going to go to Michael in New York. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I just want to follow up on the great conversation you're having with your callers, especially. Ed's call, I'm glad he brought up General Smedley Butler. That covers it all. The caller before that, spot on with everything. However, we're not an empire. Now, they got us behaving, our country as an empire, spread out across the 4 corners of the earth, spreading us thin with our resources, our troops, and our treasure, which will kill all empires as it has in the past. It'll destroy them, overextension.
Yes.
But unlike a real empire, we're not benefiting at home from all the exploitation our military is being used for abroad. That's only benefiting the United Nations and their one world government system. Our country, our government's been hijacked by those people after World War II to force all the nations in the world under the UN mandates. We're the last country to go. That's why they have to take our guns, because they can't do it if we're armed. That's why we can never let go of our arms, give them up no matter what. And if somebody complains and they say, well, now because of this law, we can take your guns because somebody thinks you're mentally unstable, there's the constitutional due process of law. Anytime our rights are being violated in any way, they have to prove in court that this is a legitimate crime. Otherwise, they shouldn't be able to accomplish that. So ultimately, the traitors in Washington, D.C. constantly conspiring to undermine our freedoms granted by the Constitution, circumventing those rights, and we can't allow that. And last, unfortunately, President Trump, like we all had hope in, he's swimming in the swamp. He's been compromised for sure. And the economy isn't great, people. Everybody knows that. And when it all crashes and burns, if we're armed, we can get them. If we're not armed, they can get us. That's another reason why they're hell-bent on trying to get our weapons from us now. And Trump is also not doing anything to get us out of this United Nations agenda activity in any respect. And so, unfortunately, President Trump is definitely letting us down. And so I wanted to just, agree with everybody on that topic as well.
Okay, well, I agree with pretty much everything you said, although I still think the United States is acting as an empire, and it's not just in service to the globalists and the United Nations, but it's in service to the oligarchs within our own society, which includes the military-industrial complex. And as I was pointing out to Dustin, the difference between the United States and other countries like Libya and Venezuela spent their nation's wealth on the nation's people, and these oligarchical societies think that's a bad example. They don't want, the serfs to get ideas. That was one of the reasons why World War II was manipulated into being, because the National Socialists in Germany had shut down the private central bank. They'd issued a value-based currency. Their economy had lit up. They called it the German miracle. And all of the world's bankers were saying, we can't let that stand, or the rest of the world is going to say, let's run our nations the way Germany is running their nation, and things are going to get better for us, which would have actually been true.
Right, Michael. Bottom line is it's all big corporate control mechanism over us. We have to get rid of these big corporations.
Well, again, wise government should be standing in the middle between corporate greed and the needs of the general public. The U.S. federal government has gone totally fascist. Anyway, got to let you go. Got to take a station identification break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here today. And we're going to go right back to the phones to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you? A couple of things real quick about the last call. I agree about the government and Trump are under control of something, because every day when I hear Sean Hannity, who I like, go over this mantra of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G of what the Democrats did and what Trump didn't do, and nothing happens every single day, I just say, what? Good luck to you, Sean, and I just turn to another station. I can't tolerate that anymore, because they're all under control of something. It could be carrots, it could be sticks. Okay. Now, but the main reason I called is to talk about the expansion of an empire and financial collapse. Because I have an interesting take on that. Before I say that, Voltaire is quoted on a website that the eventual result of fiat currency is that it'll be worth zero. I'm sure you saw that quote somewhere.
Yes.
And so I tell people, did you ever notice that the prices only go up, but they never go down? Now, in line with that, in the time of the Second Temple, the monetary system was controlled. The Second Temple was controlled first by the Greeks, starting with Ptolemy, and then going with Alexander, then his general Ptolemy. And then a couple of others, and then slowly but surely.
Excuse me. Ptolemy ruled in Egypt, not in Israel.
Right, but he had at the beginning he had control over Israel also. The high priest and the temple service was maintained, but he had certain control over the area, including the coinage. The shekels that were given to the temple at the beginning of the Second Temple period were Greek. They were Greek shekels.
Yes.
I know a lot about this. I spent books, including the New York Numismatic Society, with 100,000 volumes, and the catalog, the British catalog of the British Museum. But the point, I know this, and I know from the Talmud also. The point I'm getting to is, over years, the Romans sort of faded into position, and the Greeks were out. it culminated, of course, years later with Cleopatra, the last Ptolemaic, who married Mark Antony, and that was symbolized the full takeover of the Romans. But the point being this: it says in the Talmud that one silver coin of the state, I'll say what that means, is 1/8 of a regular silver coin. What does that mean? It means it's this: the Greeks had pure 9.99 silver coinage.
Yes.
For the larger coins, starting off with a quarter of a shekel. They called it a tetradrachm, some people would call it.
Tetradrachma.
Now, right, but I think they actually pronounced it a tetradrachm, but I'm not sure. But anyhow, what happened was, as the Romans took over and developed a worldwide empire, they started mixing in garbage with the silver.
Yes.
And that's why the Talmud says one, that's called the coinage of the state, which means the Romans' coinage. So what happened? So what my point is this: in America in 1964, all the silver, 100% was taken out of the quarters and the half dollars, etc.
Yes.
And a quarter from 64 is worth about $3.50 from the silver.
Yes.
So that's my point. Is that and this is because of empire. The Romans did it, and the Americans are doing it even bigger.
Yes. Yeah, they are.
That was my point.
Okay.
That was my point.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, love your show. I guess I'd like to say that, the gun grabbers always want to attack the objects. And, now they're going to ban knives and there's baseball bats or, my God, frying pans or whatever. And I look at a movie like The Godfather, okay, man, Godfather 3, I think it was, where Don Corleone, Michael Corleone, wanted to go and off this guy. And he sent his I think it was a Vatican financier or something. And they scanned him, they checked him out, everything like that. And he said, I want to whisper in your ears. And he took his eyeglasses off to stab the guy in the jugular.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, so it's like, well, what's next? But I guess the topic I'd like to talk about, and I'd like your expertise, opinion on, we did not have TV for many, many years, and my mother was going to live with us. And so we got TV because she liked the Weather Channel and Animal Planet and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, long story short, we watch HGTV or the Cookie, Beat Bobby Flay, all that kind of stuff, instead of mainstream news. But I've been seeing something very particular on all the commercials I see nowadays, and they're all multicultural. You
Yes.
have black guys with white women. You have black women with white men. You have Latinos. You have Asians with blacks. Are they trying to homogenize this? What is your opinion?
Yeah,
on that?
definitely. That's been a trend in advertising. They're pushing the agenda. In fact, have you noticed this rather disturbing trend of commercials where the woman is always the smart one with a solution, and the guys are always looking dumb? We see a lot of those. And maybe I'm hypersensitive to it because I worked in advertising many, many years ago, and I know how these things get put together.
So what you're saying is, and I see it as programming because it's just so right in your face now, where it wasn't like a year or two ago. So what do you think the agenda is? Why are they doing it at this point in time?
Well, I think it's actually been building for a lot longer than you've noticed it. And again, it's to just sort of acclimatize us to the idea of multicultural families, which, by the way, I don't have a problem with, okay? But they're also pushing that anti-white male agenda. And that is very disturbing to me.
Gotcha. Hey, thanks, Mike. Love your program, buddy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open. And we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in France, the Yellow Vests are continuing their protests. And apparently, over in the city of Tarbes, there were 450 protesters on Saturday. A small group of them basically broke into the local Masonic temple, threw rocks at the building, got their way inside. They overturned furniture, trashed the esoteric art, and stole 4 ceremonial swords, which were later returned. And I still think the violence is by agent provocateurs, because this other story that we have over in Global Research is showing that France is becoming much more repressive or suppressive of the yellow vests, to the detriment of the liberties of the people of France. They're becoming a very regressive country right now. All right, we have another caller on the line. Layla in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I'd like to discuss Venezuela and
Yes.
what's happening there and their relationship with Mexico. As you may know, the new Mexican president came in, and Sunday was 100 days, and he's made some very expensive, he's instituted some very expensive arrangements with Social Security, and they've been downgraded. The country has been downgraded by not only S&P but the other rating agencies. Mexico has had an on and off relationship with Venezuela, and that's also affecting what's happening there. But in Venezuela right now, apparently they're having hyperinflation. The stories of a lack of food is apparently, from eyewitnesses I've spoken to, are not accurate.
Yes.
There is food, but the cost is kind of like it was in the Weimar Republic before the Second World War, where you had to take a wheelbarrow full of money to go buy a loaf of bread.
Yes.
So I think the same forces that were at work at initiating World War II by bringing down the Weimar Republic and destroying Germany's profitability. And remember, it was the Zionists that initiated BDS, that they now object to now that it's directed against them.
Yes.
They initiated a boycott of all German products, which of course the British were very happy to go along with, because they couldn't compete with Germany's efficiency. Well, now we see the same kind of trend occurring in Venezuela. Now, Venezuela is the biggest oil reserve that we know of today, but it also is very rich in numerous other minerals. So Maduro, who followed through on the previous president's policies, it's called Chavismo. Hugo Chavez was so good in terms of sharing the wealth with the poor that he was extremely popular, so much so that they have a philosophy stemming from his policies called Chavismo. Maduro continued the Chavismo.
Yes.
Those who are trying to bring down Maduro are the wealthy elites. When apparently, and these eyewitnesses told me that what they see when you're out on the streets, those who are demonstrating are actually the mestizos, those people who are a combination of African slaves who've been brought over, along with the natives who'd also been enslaved, the indigenous peoples,
Yes.
and with some mixture with the white Europeans. They're the ones who are out there protesting. This Guaido guy came out of nowhere. Maduro might not have won the last election, which he did win with a huge margin, but he might not have won if the left had not been so completely fractured with so many different groups. But the interesting thing is that when there are massive protests, the police or army are not sent out to repress the people. And this person who's very knowledgeable on South American politics was surprised by that. They are allowed to protest, and what they do is they go to the residential areas of the extremely wealthy. So
Yes.
what I really think that, and remember, this is also happening at the same time that in Brazil we have Bolsonaro,
Yes.
who is totally pro-Israeli. His sons wear Mossad and IDF T-shirts and pray at the Western Wall, even though they're Catholics. Now, the interesting thing is in San Salvador, they've recently had an election as well, and they elected a president, Bukele. Now, Bukele's his grandparents were from Palestine. They left during the Ottoman Empire. They were Christian. Bukele's father converted to Islam. Bukele is now, when he was elected, and apparently he did all sorts of shenanigans to get elected, and Israel is behind him. This is the irony, that he has Christian grandparents a father who converted to Islam, and now he boasts that in order to get the massive vote, he boasts that his wife is part Jewish from Sephardi bloodlines in the Iberian Peninsula. So Israel has its hands all over South America. Now, with Mexico being, if they do have this hyperinflation, and it's going to, sales have dropped and the ratings have dropped. Their wealth, of course, stemmed from all the jobs that were sucked out of North America and sent to them. So that destroyed our power base, our economic power base, sent it to Mexico. Now they're stirring up Central America and South America. And we know what happened in Argentina and Chile. It's going to be a nightmare. We are headed for certainly some kind of economic disaster that is grossly manipulated.
Yes.
I mean, even the Bank of Mexico, which is, of course, controlled by the Central Global Bank, has downgraded Mexico's forecast. So some people have joked that the wall should be put up when what is his name? They're calling him AMLO because he uses four names. Obrador is the very last name, López Obrador. But this president, people joke that we need a wall to keep Americans in because he doubled the minimum wage,
yes.
Made it much easier to get welfare and a bunch of other things. So people were saying that there was going to be a flood back to Mexico, including Americans. But instead, what is happening now, it's gone out of control. And I read in the Japan Times that they see him as a one-man show. No one else seems, he's always out in front of the microphones, much like Trump was always on Twitter. López Obrador was always holding at 7 a.m. every day. He has a press conference. Well, that is also beginning to backfire on him. So we have to be prepared for not only what's going to happen within the U.S. and ultimately Canada, but both Canada and Mexico have always ridden the coattails of a prosperous U.S. Now that the U.S. is declining, we're still on those coattails. They're going down. Meanwhile, Israel is very gladly involved in it, just like they did with the cycle of so-called Arab Spring. They instigated all the chaos throughout the Arab-speaking world. That's going to happen, I believe, throughout South America, Latin America, and it's going to be, meanwhile, they've got walls all around Israel. I'm sorry. I see almost this is a dark drama, a dark comedy. Talk about history repeating itself, but again, it repeats itself because the same malicious forces or malignant forces are manipulating events. It's just the timing. And what that gentleman said about the homogenization of humanity, that's been going on for a long time, even without design. Simply because, I mean, when people ask me now, what is your ethnicity? I say I'm an omelet. I mean, they're everywhere around the world. There's so much migration. We're also intermingled. The only thing that distinguishes us is our politics and our religion. And those
our culture.
Dictate our cultural values.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of, harping on Trump is almost futile because he's only one puppet in a large scenario. Unfortunately, what my father used to call the Zionist gangsters, and that's what I now call them. They're not even. It's just like a global mafiosi that's headquartered in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and they are most certainly not the people of the book. In fact, they used to be known, when I lived in Montreal, we used to call them Yiddishers because they all spoke Yiddish, and they were Yiddish, and that's what they were because the J, even in German, does not exist. The J is pronounced as Yo. So the Jews that came out of Germany were called, maybe Juden, but they were primarily Yiddishers by the language they spoke, which was Old German. But anyway, all of this is just, I don't know what can be done, if anything can be done, but the thing is we've got to be aware that it is happening. And as the old saying goes, you've got to get to the head of the snake. So what we unarmed or partially armed, helpless people can do who are now divided. We are now divided by ethnic lines, religious lines. We're fractured. It's like a rock when it has when you do rock splitting, you always look for cleavages. Those are lines upon which you can cleanly fracture. Well, they're not even doing clean fractures. They're just smashing the world.
Yes.
And I find it very frightening because it's not just one place, one city, one region of the world. It's Europe. It's the Middle East. It's all of it's Australia.
It's Africa, and now it's South America, and
Africa,
yeah, we're heading.
Yes, in the Americas. Yeah.
We're basically in a world war. Nobody wants to stand up and say that, but yeah, we're in a world war right now. And the really big question is, how long before the United States is directly in conflict with Russia and China? And if you go back to that earlier story about the RAND study, about how the U.S. military, even with all the money they have cost, would not be able to prevail against Russia and China in a conventional war, you know that if the United States government mixes it up with Russia and China, at some point it will go nuclear.
And of course, Israel, of course, has made innuendos, offered its hand of cooperation with both Russia. Well, we know Putin is supporting, or appears for public appearances. We believe that Putin is a stabilizing factor with Netanyahu. I don't trust Putin. That man can go anyway, just like our Trump did. And as for China, God, that's a frightening concept. But both of them, the old Chinese empire was very powerful. And we have to remember the Opium Wars, where Britain intentionally created addictions that affected the whole country. And China
Layla
has a real gripe.
Yeah, Layla, I'm sorry to do this. We got to take another break for commercials. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, I'm going to put on my beggar's robe and cry alms for the poor, because Republic Broadcasting does need your support. As I pointed out many times before, nobody's getting rich in independent media if they're doing the job they should be doing. Unfortunately, some of the independent media has sold out. They've become compromised, and all of a sudden they got millions of dollars to build studios and try and basically capture the people who don't trust the corporate media anymore. Republic Broadcasting isn't like that. We're kind of humble. In fact, we've got more humble than any other independent media outlet that's out there. And you can see what's going on around right now. And if independent media goes away, if Republic Broadcasting goes away, then the corporate media is going to convince America to march into another war, and then another war, and then another war, and then another war. Because that's what the U.S. government wants to do. And the clearest proof of that is looking at Trump's proposed budget. He's slashing domestic spending. He's taking all of your money and he's giving it to the military. It is a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's exactly what that budget says. It's a wartime economy. We're going to neglect the nation. We're going to neglect the people. We're just going to keep on banging out those bombs and bullets and the rest of it. So if independent media is to survive, it depends on you. So just as a thought, and this goes back to something Carl Sagan said a few years ago about how America spends more on pizza than it does on space exploration, which is actually true. Maybe consider having one less pizza a month and instead donate that money to Republic Broadcasting. And because every little bit will help. And if everybody listening to my voice were to chip in, you know, the equipment is wearing out. You have no idea what it takes to keep all of this stuff running. I've lost track of the number of computers I've gone through since I started this 25 years ago. You know, been through, this is, I think, my third mixer. It's just never ending. It really is. So if you can help out, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. The network thanks you. Every little bit is appreciated. There's no such thing as too small of a donation. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Raleigh in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I'm actually fasting today and the rest of the week just so I can make a donation to RBN. It's definitely worth my money. The only type of entertainment that's free is government entertainment, and they get it from our taxes anyways. So I'm definitely going to make an investment with RBN this week. Mike,
Thank you.
I was going to mention last time I was on your show, that side of my hemisphere that stored information about kratom, Metrogona speciosa,
Yes.
I can retrieve it. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about kratom, and I'm really glad that I could, share some information for you, especially since Claire has used it, and for the listeners as well. So I actually had taken some of my all-natural Adderall just earlier just to keep up with Layla. She's a wealth of information, but
Yes, she is.
Kratom is a very good source, a supplement, if you will. It's kind of a catch-all in Southeast Asia for all sorts of ailments. It's for chronic pain, weight loss, anxiety, depression. And it helps focus, and it's an energy enhancer, and it makes really a productive workday, to be honest with you. I know that some of the old-timers, they haven't been around the playgrounds. They haven't heard about Tom, which is not only the slang name for it inside of the United States, but also in Southeast Asia as well. It is going to be scheduled as it's going to be a Schedule 1, in the same class as heroin pretty soon. It's on wobbly, shaky grounds right now. The big PR campaigns, in the mainstream media has phrased the discussion about kratom as being bad for recovery for heroin addicts and morphine users. So what? What about it? People that never done those drugs before, and just one of the things that I just mentioned, energy and focus. I watched The Doctors, which is a show on BBS, and they never had CIA propaganda on CBS.
Well, it's not CIA propaganda. It's corporate pharmaceutical corporation propaganda, because they don't want anything coming into the American marketplace that is lower in cost and more readily available than their prescription opiates. They've built up this huge infrastructure of pushing opiates, which has resulted in a lot of deaths. So yeah, they control TV advertising. Stay on the line, Raleigh. I'm going to come right back to you after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Raleigh in Minnesota, and we're talking about kratom and the fact that the corporate media is out there bad-mouthing it. It's terrible. It's dangerous. You don't want to use it. Folks, it's just advertising. And we know that the pharmaceutical corporations spend vast amounts of money for television advertising, and it's not necessarily to push the sales of those products. It's simply to give them leverage over the corporate media so that the pharmaceutical corporations can say, ooh, my goodness, this kratom, this is a threat to our profitability. This is going to displace opiates. And so they'll call up their contacts at the corporate media and say, we need a negative article here, and we've got this. We just came up with this, scientific report by a scientist who works for us that says it's bad stuff. And again, it's basically very cleverly concealed advertising. And there's nothing new with that. There's nothing new with that at all. Very often, pharmaceutical corporations, they'll actually create these shell foundations that sound like they're operating in the public interest, and they say, oh, well, you need to go this way. It's all part of the game here. Anyway, Raleigh, yeah, it does look like they're going to schedule it. And have you noticed this fight over marijuana? I mean, some states have legalized medical marijuana. We have medical marijuana here in Hawaii. those few states that have legalized marijuana for recreational use, have you noticed the pushback that's coming from the alcohol and tobacco industry? It's all about preserving their market share. And the last thing they want are for people to start using recreational materials or even treating their own illnesses with stuff that they can make at home or grow out in their backyard. And that's what this is really all about.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And the experts have been making their circuits on talk shows, holding a bag up of kratom like it's spice or bath salts, because they did that a couple of years ago. And they framed the discussion in the same way, saying, like, I have no idea what's in this substance right here. It's just like truck stop spice, and it's 40 chemicals of compounds. Oh, that's such a mystery what it is, It's one ingredient. It's kratom.
Yeah,
they just take it
it's
from
the plant. They take the leaves, they dry it, grind it up. That's what the ingredients. And it's amazing. We should be seeing the same scrutiny over all those adjuvants in vaccines, but the vaccines make money for big pharma, so we're not going to talk about them. We're going to go after alternative medicines. And I remember when they tried to ban colloidal silver. And they did succeed for a while, and the public outcry was intense, so they descheduled it, but limited the parts per million that it could be at. But it's not really in the public interest. It's all about keeping pharmaceutical corporations profitable.
They'll stab your arm with a long needle to stop your pain. Do you have tracks and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Ignoring the natural law that you could find healthy alternatives. I was just watching the movie John Q with Denzel Washington where he takes a hostage, and that movie can only take place in the United States, where he's saying, "Sick, help my kid," because he's taking a hostage in order to get help by the hospital. It's been around for a very long time. I don't know if you knew this aspect of it. It was discovered. They say it's discovered when it's a European discoverer, in 1832 by a man named Peter Williams. I found this in a Dusty book. He was a member of the East India Trading Company, that opium, British, drug front company.
Yes.
And he did everything he could to get rid of this drug, but still, or I shouldn't say drug, but like this, this great, source of, beneficial medicine, and he did everything to eradicate it and pretty much kept it with him because he was afraid that if this thing was around that nobody would want to do opium anymore. And it's really odd because we see history repeating itself where people are worried that people won't be interested in doing Percocets anymore. And I got to tell you, it is a better buzz, you know what I mean, doing kratom. And I will say this, Michael, have you ever heard of big things come in small packages?
Yes.
I actually do less amount than they recommend on the package because if you take too much of it, your brain gets indigestion kind of thing where you can't function as correctly. If you take
Claire noticed that she only takes a little tiny bit just to take the edge off the pain, and now that she's starting to finally get better, she's taking even less of that. There was one time when I had done something dumb to my ankle, and I tried some of the kratom, and I'll be very honest, I did not like the way it made me feel. But then, of course, that isn't why I took it. Anyway, listen, Raleigh, we're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call, and then I'm going to shut the phone lines down because I'm way, way behind on the talking points. So let's go to Kevin in West Virginia. Oh, we lost Kevin. All right, so the lines are closed. And let me get on back here to the news because there's a lot going on here. Okay, over in Algeria, getting back on this idea that the whole world seems to be going crazy. Over in Algeria, there are major protests going on, tens of thousands of people last Friday demanding President Abdelaziz Bouteflika step down. Now, he's getting ready to run for re-election, but apparently the Algerians are not happy with that idea at all. And the protest, which coincided with International Women's Day, saw an even larger crowd pour into the streets of the capital compared to previous mass gatherings. Interestingly enough, the unrest in Algeria now threatens France with another migration wave on the way. And that could actually prove problematic for Emmanuel Macron. Okay. Now, this is an interesting development here. One of the U.S. strategic goals in, well, pretty much everywhere in the world, but certainly in the Middle East, is to keep the various nations fighting against each other. It was the United States that was behind the Iran-Iraq war. They were funding Iraq. They gave them the money for Gerald Bull's supergun and so forth and so on. But these countries are starting to see that's the game. And now they're starting to pull together. So Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is now in Baghdad to solidify strategic ties, despite U.S. efforts to keep the two neighbors apart as a means to curb Iran's influence in the region. So this is a major blow to U.S. foreign policy in the region, to have Iraq and Iran coming together. That's going to be a major power block. And basically, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said that Iran will be opening a new chapter with Iraq. So they've buried the hatchet, and it looks like they're going to be coming together. And this will give both nations a much stronger base on which to resist any more U.S. hegemony. Now, a little bit of good news over in India, Pakistan. It may be winding down. Maybe. Now, this whole thing, of course, began with a terror attack in India. The government of India insisted the government of Pakistan had something to do with it. The government of Pakistan denied having any connection with the terrorist group. India launched an attack bombed Pakistan. And Pakistan is saying that India violated the line of control, which is why they shot down one of the jets. They captured the pilot, but then they released him as a goodwill gesture. Now, there has been some heavy shelling, but even so, the Indian ambassador to Russia, in an interview with Sputnik News, said that as of right now, India is not considering any more strikes against Pakistan at the moment. That's the good news. The bad news is that up in Pakistan, Prime Minister Imran Khan said the country was ready for war and its army would respond if attacked by India or, quote, any superpower, end quote. And he said this during a speech in southeast Pakistan's Chachkro town. So that kind of fiery rhetoric, I'm sure it's good for politics, but I do wish they would cool it down. Over in the South China Sea, apparently Japan has opened up a new crisis response headquarters after a Chinese patrol ship entered what Japan claims are their territorial waters next to the disputed islands in the East China Sea. And apparently 4 Chinese corvettes approached the territorial waters of Japan. Apparently one of them crossed into the Japanese area near the disputed Senkaku Islands. Now, one of the things that's making this whole situation so complicated is that everybody has declared territorial waters around their countries and these islands. Unfortunately, because they're so close, there's a bit of an overlap. And so it's possible to be in waters that are covered by territorial claims from China and Japan at the same time, or China and Vietnam at the same time. Apparently, there was an attack on the North Korean embassy in Madrid last February. Apparently, a group of unidentified people broke into the mission, blocked the diplomats, and seized computers. Now, according to El Confidencial newspaper, Spain's national police and the Foreign Intelligence Unit of the National Intelligence Center are looking at all possible versions of what happened. Nevertheless, the sources told the newspaper that the theory that the U.S. intelligence agencies were behind this attack is gaining momentum. All right. Last week, our corporate media was filled with these satellite pictures showing that there was new construction activity at 2 launch facilities in North Korea. And this was followed up by saying, oh, they're getting ready to launch. They're getting ready to launch. We can see it in the satellite. They're getting ready to launch. But according to this story out of Zero Hedge, experts looking at the photos are saying there's absolutely no indication of any pre-launch activity. It looks like they're repairing and refurbishing the facilities. But there are no rockets on the gantries. It doesn't look like they're getting ready to do anything. This is, again, it's corporate media propaganda to keep up the fear. Oh, I'm afraid of North Korea, which, considering where I'm sitting, that's a reasonable situation. Over in Gaza, Israel has bombed them for the 3rd night in a row in what is being called a vigorous response ordered by Netanyahu in response to an explosive balloon. This is a helium balloon with a firecracker on it, is basically what it is. Only one of these things has ever caused any real damage in Israel, and it broke a window. That's how powerful they are. Which makes me suspect that this is not Hamas who's doing these explosive balloons. Because Hamas is not going to do something that they have to know is going to be totally ineffective, but will provoke an Israeli response. So I think these balloons and these bottle rockets are being launched by agent provocateurs. And even this article is saying this vigorous response against Hamas was ordered by Netanyahu as part of the gearing up for his re-election. By the way, during the commercial break, I was looking for more sources and sites on that claim that Syria is saying that if the IDF does not leave the Golan, they will attack Israel. I can find no source for it other than the Israeli media. And as I mentioned before when I talked about the story, not a word from the United Nations. So I think that may be a propaganda run-up primarily for the benefit of the Israeli people, for a huge explosion inside Israel to be blamed on Syria. And with the elections coming up very quickly, it's liable to happen very, very soon here. The Great March of Return in Gaza is now in its 50th week. 2 more weeks will be the 1-year anniversary. And since March 30th of last year, protesters in Gaza have demanded the right to return to their homes and villages in historical Palestine, which they were promised both by the United Nations and by the then newly formed State of Israel. The protesters are also demanding an end to Israel's 12-year blockade of the Gaza Strip, which has gutted the coastal enclave's economy and deprived its roughly 2 million inhabitants of many basic commodities. So this last Friday, more than 7,000 Gazans demonstrated, more than half of them women. And I imagine in 2 weeks there's going to be a massive, massive demonstration. And Israel needs to be very careful how they respond to it, because the eyes of the world are watching what's going on. And the optics are very bad. The Great March of Return, they are succeeding in that world opinion is turning against Israel. Getting on back to the United Nations, a lot of people are starting to take them to task because the United Nations created this list of Israeli and international companies that profit directly from Israel's illegal settlements in the occupied territories, and they're sitting on it. They're refusing to publish it. Activists want to know the names of those companies so they can be targeted for boycotts, and obviously Israel doesn't want that to happen and has applied the appropriate, shall we say, motivation to the United Nations to not have that done. Okay, this is going to make the people of Idaho feel really comfortable and secure. Apparently, police in Idaho were forced to close down a highway after a semi-truck carrying missiles for the military crashed. Okay, this truck veered off the main road at a rest stop along I-90 in northern Idaho on Friday night. And the driver was aiming for the interstate on-ramp, but instead accidentally drove into the hazardous material containment area. So that's very thrilling. Now, for those of you who are concerned about this, you need to understand that U.S. munitions, bombs, are designed to be as safe as possible until they are used. And obviously, these missiles would not be on the truck with the detonators. Now, the types of fillers, which is the name for the stuff that actually goes boom, they are chemically engineered to not detonate without a detonator. They'll burn, they'll deflagrate, but they won't actually explode without a shock wave being sent into them, and that's what the detonator does. We got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, turning to the domestic politics here. And we've already talked about Trump's new budget. He's slashing domestic spending. The U.S. government has taken all this money away from you. They don't feel that they need to spend any of it on you, or not as much as last year. It's all going to the war machine. Huge increase in the military budget. It's a wartime economy. So that's the reality. Okay. And there are now growing calls for Ocasio-Cortez and her former campaign manager, Saikat Chakrabarti, to be investigated for possible campaign finance violations. And there's a little bit of irony here, because she has criticized the use of untraceable money in political campaigns and portrayed herself as a champion of campaign finance reform. And yet here she was, set up with a Nixonian slush fund. Looking over at her Green New Deal, there was a news story that came on out claiming that over 80% of American voters support the Green New Deal. And this is based on a recent survey by a group of academic pollsters. And supposedly the support is bipartisan, with 92% of Democrats and 64% of Republicans indicating they either strongly or somewhat support the far left package to reshape the entire American economy around green energy in the course of the next decade. But there's more to the story, because it turns out this was a push poll. It was conducted by a team of professors at George Mason University in Virginia, Yale University in Connecticut. And the trick behind a push poll is that they didn't simply ask voters directly about the Green New Deal. They first presented them with this synopsis, a very glowing synopsis that touted the proposition's fantastic claims. In other words, it's a sales pitch. So the voters were getting this thing saying, oh, the Green New Deal will do this, the Green New Deal will do that, it's going to be wonderful for everyone. Then they asked, would you support this? Well, it sounds like it's a good idea. That's not an accurate way of conducting a poll. It's a way of generating the numbers that you want. And I'm having to wonder if the same technique was being used because of this story that came out of Axios reporting that Generation Z has a more positive view of the word socialism than previous generations. And they're more likely to embrace socialistic policies and principles than past generations. Now, part of that, of course, is we older people, we link the word socialism with the Soviet Union. But again, is this an accurate measure of what young people are thinking, or are we being fed a bogus poll yet again? This, by the way, came from Harris Poll. Alrighty, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And getting on back to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, basically claiming Fox News is propaganda. And she sort of went after Devin Nunes, trying to make him look dumb for joking about straws being illegal in California. But it's backfired on her because, in point of fact, California did pass a law that says restaurants are not allowed to simply hand out straws. The customer has to specifically request them, because apparently now plastic straws have become the biggest threat to life on Earth. And here I was worrying about those nuclear weapons. Now, here's some good news. This should really kick off some things. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals has sided with Chernovich and is ordering the records unsealed in the Jeffrey Epstein case unless good cause is shown. Now, what that means is, pardon me, as you know, Jeffrey Epstein got this sweetheart deal, basically a wrist slap over this issue of basically sexually abusing underage girls in his Florida mansion. And apparently a lot of high-profile people were involved with that. And he's got his own private jet, which he calls the Lolita Express. There's a dead giveaway. And he's got this island getaway as well. And so all of a sudden it's come on. What's going on? How did a guy who committed these horrific crimes just basically walk away from it? So the court is signaling it's going to unseal the records and make them public. And they've issued a show cause order. And basically that is saying that if you want these records to remain sealed, you'd better come up with something good. Now, hopefully Epstein doesn't have a video of that judge in his archive. But I'd certainly be mildly curious about the political machinations as to how Epstein got to walk free here. Alrighty, from the category of collusion, this is from Zero Hedge. This gets back to Christopher Steele, the MI6 agent who was the author of the now totally shredded dossier about Donald Trump. Now, Steele was basically let go by the FBI. He'd been working as an informant, but he made statements to the media, which is against the rules, and so they let him go. But as it turns out, Judicial Watch has uncovered records showing that the Department of Justice continued to protect Christopher Steele after he was officially let go by the FBI. So he was one of their assets and their tools. Senator Elizabeth Warren announced her presidential run to the world, and she did it with the Dolly Parton hit 9 to 5 playing behind her. And playing a hit song like that one can create a powerful moment, as it was intended to do. Unfortunately, it has triggered a backlash because Dolly Parton has gone public saying that she absolutely did not give Elizabeth Warren permission to use that song on the campaign trail, and as a matter of policy, never allows any of her music to be used for political purposes. So, little bit of a situation there. Come on, Elizabeth Warren, why don't you just play some Native American music behind you? That'll be a really good moment here. One good thing that we're seeing, this gets back to what I was saying about the optics on the Great March of Return actually working. It's turning world opinion against Israel. And even in our country, even in our Congress, we're starting to see some of the young Democrats breaking that taboo, and they're starting to criticize Israel. That includes Tulsi Gabbard, our own Hawaii's own Tulsi Gabbard, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ilhan Omar. And usually saying anything negative about Israel, that's the third rail of U.S. politics. You are just over. And I'm glad that Ilhan Omar is weathering the attacks against her, along with Alexandria and Tulsi, because they shouldn't back down. They're not in that Congress to take care of Israel. They're in that Congress to take care of we, the American people. And we need more just like them. As we reported last week, whistleblower Chelsea Manning was arrested after a federal judge found her to be in contempt of court for refusing to respond to questions about the 2010 WikiLeaks leak, which made WikiLeaks and Chelsea famous, was where they intercepted and decoded this video from a helicopter showing them basically shooting up a camera crew. And people are saying, Chelsea actually didn't do anything wrong being a whistleblower, and neither did WikiLeaks. And that's the thing. This secret grand jury that Manning was testifying to is thought to be connected to this supposed charges they're bringing against Julian Assange. Now, this article, which appeared over in Sputnik News, is saying that Manning's arrest is basically showing that the U.S. government is willing to take revenge against anyone who challenges Washington and its political point of view. And that certainly seems like that's exactly what's going on here. Now, as far as WikiLeaks is concerned, again, Julian Assange hasn't actually done anything illegal. He did not solicit classified information. It was handed to him, and he reported it as a member of the independent media. And again, going all the way back to Richard Nixon and the Pentagon Papers, the Supreme Court ruled that classified information could be shared in the national interest, that the press was given the First Amendment to serve the governed and not the governors. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So we're seeing a war between the corporate media and the independent media. They're trying to get us censored off of the corporate social media platforms. That's actually resulting in people leaving those corporate media social platforms, which they don't want to admit because that's a decline in their ad revenues. Meanwhile, story coming out of AP News is talking about how paper newspapers are folding by the hundreds. Small town newspapers, there's a decline in readers. People don't trust the newspapers anymore. They don't trust the corporate TV news. They're going on out to the web with a search engine and try and find out what's really going on before they have a mushroom cloud out their living room window. Part of the trend here, this is rather interesting, this is over in the Daily Mail. Apparently more and more corporate news organizations are switching to AI to produce stories, personalized news delivery, and in some cases sift through data trying to find important news. And this article is saying, will they ever replace traditional reporters? Well, I don't know. Most of the prostitutes and correspondents these days have been acting like robots all along. Yes, I will put this in my news story. No, I won't mention the bad stuff. So let's talk about the economic news. The indicators are not good. Yes, the stock market had a really good day today, but there's an interesting little article that came out of Investment Watch blog basically saying there are two completely different perceptions about the economy. And one side is clearly ignoring reality and telling you everything is just fine, just go on spending and everything's going to be okay. The other side is looking at the numbers and it shows the economy is extremely fragile. It's weaker now than it was during the financial crisis of 2008. And the odd part is that no matter how strong a bubble becomes, how visible it is, it's always ignored until it's too late. Because people make money off of those bubbles. The skill of the game is to leap off just at the point it's going to pop. And then, of course, the losses are dropped on smaller investors and ordinary people. Article out of Zero Hedge. The $64 trillion question, with foreigners stepping aside, who will buy U.S. treasuries? And that's been a question a lot of people are asking. Well, the answer is really quite simple. The Federal Reserve is just creating new money out of thin air, and it buys up the treasury bonds, trying to keep the system going for a while. Now, the result is that between 2008 In the fall of 2014, there were 3 successive rounds of quantitative easing, and it quadrupled the monetary base of the U.S. dollar from less than 1 trillion to more than 4 trillion. They've been trying to hide the inflationary effects of that, but I imagine that much of that 4 trillion has now been used to buy up some of those treasury bonds. The entire system is being rigged just to keep it going, just to keep it ticking along here. Now, countries all over the world are getting anxious about their gold, which is not under their own control. We had that situation years ago with Germany trying to get their gold back, Venezuela getting their gold back, and now Romania has introduced a bill to repatriate its gold reserves. And it's straining the system because there are a lot of people who think that gold isn't all there anymore. We did a segment on America's Book of Secrets about that. China, Russia, India, Poland, and Turkey are just a few of the countries that have made no secret of their plans for long-term accumulation of precious metals in order to diversify their national reserves out of the U.S. dollar and into hard money. All I can say to Romania is good luck getting it back. Now, Romania supposedly holds 103.7 tons of gold, or at least they believe they do. At some point, the gold vaults are going to come up short. And that's when there's going to be a gold run here. Experts are predicting that New York City is heading for financial ruin, and it could go bankrupt for the first time in 40 years. Now, the last time the city came close to filing for bankruptcy was back in 1975 when former President Ford refused to give the city a bailout package to settle its debt. What's going on today, of course, is individuals and businesses are leaving the city for lower tax areas, and city government spending is at an all-time high, including dealing with the homeless crisis and the immigrants. So basically, New York is facing bankruptcy due to the high taxes. The taxes basically drove away the producers, the earners, and left behind liabilities. There's even word that New York will soon impose a departure tax, where they will literally tax you for wanting to leave New York. You know, we're moving down to Florida. Oh, no, that's going to cost you a lot there. We've been hearing a lot about Venezuela's oil company and how much trouble they're in, but it turns out that the world's most indebted oil company is actually Pemex in Mexico. And apparently Standard & Poor's has become the latest in a succession of rating agencies to downgrade the company. Now, Pemex is state-owned. It's owned by the Mexican government. That's one of the trends that we saw across South America. State-owned oil companies. That's what they have in Venezuela. That's what the U.S. oil companies want to bring to an end. So, looking at this article and looking at the numbers, is the United States starting to do to Mexico today what they've been doing to Venezuela for years? I've been talking about this tendency for the United States to, instead of improving our productivity and our manufactured goods and our agriculture, to simply arm twist other countries to continue to do business with us. And here's a good example. Apparently, the United States government is now warning Germany not to use Huawei products in the rollout of their next generation 5G products, or they will lose intelligence sharing with U.S. intelligence agencies. And Marco Rubio is out there basically ripping Italy for its desire to sign on to the One Belt, One Road initiative. And so Rubio's just out there, how dare you, the Italians' openness to joining this. It's stunningly naive here. And what he's basically saying, paraphrasing him, so you don't dare do business with them. You only do business with us. What do we have that we're going to do business with there, Marco? Everything's crumbling. Most of our factories are rusted hulks. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Anyway, we're continuing to see all these retail outlets on death watch. This is coming from money.com, and they're talking about all these stores that are just going into bankruptcy and shutting down. You can't tell me this economy is booming. You have to look at all these indicators corporate media is feeding at you and recognize them for what they are: propaganda. ICE down on the border is once again having to drop dozens of migrants at the Phoenix bus station. They're simply overwhelmed. They don't have the resources to keep these people, which they're supposed to. They're just letting them through, putting them on buses, except for 2,200 who have now been quarantined over these unprecedented disease outbreaks. These migrants are carrying everything from mumps to chickenpox. This is a health crisis, along with an immigration crisis. And here comes confirmation for something I've been telling you all along. Story out of the Gateway Pundit. The Democrats have rejected a motion that says only Americans can vote. They openly support foreigners to carry them in 2020. Now, House Democrats passed the For the People Act, and basically the legislation makes it legal for illegal Americans and foreigners to vote in elections. The bill also makes voter harvesting legal. They're getting ready to steal 2020. They're not even trying to hide it. Now, Republican Representative Dan Crenshaw offered a motion to the amendment to reaffirm that only U.S. citizens should have the right to vote, which is the law, and Democrats rejected the vote. Now, I'm not sure what the Democrats are thinking they're going to be able to do here, because Trump is certainly going to veto this. Nancy Pelosi was at a press conference in Austin, Texas, saying that our new immigrants, have a right to vote. That's the new buzzword. We don't call them illegal anymore. They're new immigrants. They just haven't been processed is all. But by golly, they should have a right to vote because we know they're going to vote Democratic. They're not even trying to hide it. They're going to steal 2020 with illegal immigrant voting. And Trump is sitting on his rear end in that custom form-fitting chair in the Oval Office, and he doesn't seem interested in doing anything about it. Somebody needs to talk to him from his campaign headquarters and just say, look, you're going to lose this one. Everything that Trump and those who supported him had to overcome in 2016 is going to be quadrupled to take him out. Over in Sweden, Swedish terrorism expert Magnus Ranstorp is warning Sweden against taking back these ISIS terrorists and their wives and children. That's a big thing. The U.S. is now saying we have all these ISIS terrorists in Syria that we trained, and they're ready to go back home, and you got to take them. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, Mirko. Welcome back to our show here. Over in Finland, they're basically in trouble. And apparently the government has literally collapsed over the cost of their universal health care program. Denmark and Sweden are also in trouble. And, Finland has long been touted by American socialists as nirvana, where everything is free and everyone is happy. And fiscal reality hit Finland's government as it collapsed Friday. See, socialism only works as long as you have other people's money to spend. And when you run out of other people's money, it comes down. Now, where this is going to be felt most here in our political structure is with the campaign of Bernie Sanders, who has been hanging his socialist mantle, if you will, on the success of Finland's socialist structure. Oops, Bernie. I mean, ultimately, socialism doesn't really work. It did succeed in lasting a long while in the Soviet Union, but in the end it came apart. You've got to have a system in which people are encouraged to work, encouraged to excel, encouraged to take responsibility for their lives. And those who don't want to work and produce get abandoned, unless there is extenuating circumstances like, injury or illness. We do have to take care of our helpless. But the nanny state really doesn't work. All right, we're about 19 days away from the deadline for Brexit, and apparently the push to keep Britain in the Eurozone is really ramping up. It looks like British lawmakers are probably going to reject Theresa May's latest exit deal, and there is even talk she's going to be forced to step down. March 29th is it. That's when Great Britain is due to leave the European Union. And Theresa May is scrambling to secure last-minute changes to the exit deal before Parliament votes tomorrow on whether to approve the deal. Now, if she fails, and that now seems likely, Parliament may force May to seek a delay to Brexit, which some say could see the 2016 decision to leave the bloc completely and totally reversed. I think that'll get the British people into the streets in their yellow vests. Anyway. Okay, I want to talk about this. Not good news for Boeing. Apparently, Sunday, an Ethiopian Airlines passenger jet bound for Nairobi crashed just minutes after takeoff, killing all 157 people on board. This plane was a Boeing 737 MAX 8. This is a new model, and they had a similar crash in Indonesia in October on Lion Air, and the Lion Air jet crashed near Jakarta, again, minutes after takeoff, killing all 189 people on board. Now, what's really interesting is that in both cases, the pilots radioed to the airport that they were going to have to turn around, that they were having difficulty with the aircraft maintaining a stable altitude, that it seemed to be misbehaving and porpoising. And they were saying they were having difficulties, they wanted to turn back, and they didn't make it to the airport. So all of a sudden, people are now wondering, is there in fact a design flaw in this aircraft? And Boeing is now under scrutiny. China has grounded their entire 737 MAX fleet, saying it's not going to be allowed back into the air until somebody figures out what the heck is going on. And a lot of other global carriers are following suit. And Boeing's stock price took a major hit on this. So, okay. At the same time, the Ethiopian Airlines Group announced temporary ban on operating their 4 737 MAX planes after the crash as a safety precaution. Cayman Airways, Mongolia, they're all shutting it down. That plane is basically going to be a lawn ornament at this point. And I feel sorry for all those people at Boeing who work on these aircraft, and it's a beautiful looking aircraft. But we've been hearing all these stories about, Boeing used to build these amazing aircraft that just didn't go wrong. I mean, the 707 was legendary. And the 707, of course, got to be prominent in aviation because of the disaster of the de Havilland Comet. The de Havilland Comet was the world's first jet-powered passenger plane, but their windows kept popping out, and the plane was basically grounded. Passengers didn't want to go on it, and that's when Boeing stepped in with the 707. And it was a huge success, but lately it seems like everything Boeing produces has got problems. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to take a moment here to wander through the beautiful fairy tale landscape of political correctness. Now, apparently out at Reed College in Oregon, the dorm advisors were given a tolerance training program, which included a graphic showing Make America Great Again as an example of covert white supremacy. And the outlet said that the pyramid graphic divides white supremacy examples into overt and covert, and declared that Make America Great Again was part of the covert white supremacy. It's a little bit out there here. Now, this is a very, very interesting story, and it touches on a lot of things. This is from Chimp Planet. The National Alliance on Mental Health has a statistic. More than 25% of college students have been diagnosed or treated by a professional for a mental health condition within the past year. Now you let that sink in. 25%. Colleges are basically turning into psychiatric screening centers and medical clinics. Because you know, these more than 25% of these college students, how is their mental health condition going to be treated? Pills. Now you get on back to my concerns about prescription psychiatric medication. I think we just found the source for all this bizarre behavior we're seeing on college campuses. I think all this, I'm triggered and I need safe spaces and all the rest of that, it's coming out of a bottle. And these drugs are dangerous and destabilizing. And of course, somebody who's got a mental health condition, who's been diagnosed as having a mental health condition, they get to play victim again. All righty. Oh, you're going to love this one. Actress Deborah Messing, basically to celebrate International Women's Day, tweeted a photo of cupcakes she had made with vagina-shaped frosting on the top. Did a very nice job on them. Got a huge backlash, okay? Because it was an insult to transgender women who don't have a vagina. How could you be so heartless? It's amazing. All right, I'm going to put this in here right now because I don't know that I'm going to get down to the normal place where I would talk about human-caused global warming. But if you're in San Diego, there's a winter storm warning that went into effect as of noon your time today. And there's a snowstorm moving into the region, bringing up to 4 inches of snow between 5,000 and 6,000 feet. Above 6,000 feet, the snowfall could reach 8 inches. So if you have reasons to be in the mountains of San Diego County, take the appropriate precautions here. We have been talking about the fact that corporate social media, Facebook, Google, Twitter, so forth and so on, they've definitely grown a little bit too big for their britches. And along with the censorship, they're now presuming, arrogating, if you will, a larger role in trying to control policymakers. And there was apparently this leaked audio that came out at CPAC, or about CPAC, in which Google is saying, we're out here to steer conservatives and policymakers. And it was a recording of an internal meeting to address Google's sponsorship of a prominent conservative conference. It appears to confirm these accusations that the tech giant is biased against Republicans and is trying to steer U.S. politics. Well, that's not their job. U.S. politics are supposed to be steered by the voters. The Twitter CEO is now trying to pull back and apologize. Apparently, they're losing a lot of people. Twitter co-founder and CEO Jack Dorsey was addressing claims that Twitter was targeting conservatives, which they are, and admitted they may have acted too swiftly. We may have been a little too aggressive, and probably our team having a lack of context into what's actually happening, and well, we made mistakes. No, it wasn't a mistake. It was an intentional program, and you got caught out about it. Over at Facebook, more than 17 million of their younger users, which is in that prime demographic that advertisers like to reach, have quit over the data privacy scandals and the censorship. And they're flocking to Instagram, which I don't know if that's any better. But people are looking for alternatives. They understand Google is not their friend anymore. Facebook is not their friend anymore. Twitter's not their friend anymore. They're going to the alternatives. Now, this next article, this came out of Investment Watch blog, and it's probably going to raise the hairs on the back of your necks. And it's an article written by this guy who claims to have actually proven that your smartphones are listening to you for the purposes of advertising. And he tried this experiment. He spent a full week repeating 4 products throughout the entire week. He was using Instagram or Snapchat, and to see if they would show one of the products through the ads. And it actually showed 2 of them. And the rules that he'd set up for the experiment were that these were products that he'd never Googled before, would not even be allowed to type in Google. And he posted an 8-minute video. So that is a little bit scary. So if you've got one of those digital assistants there, you need to be careful. And if you need a private conversation, you got to put your smartphone in another room or wrap it in aluminum foil or get one of those RFI cases. Over in Russia, there's a major protest going on against new restrictions on the internet. And Russia basically backed tighter controls, saying it's necessary to prevent foreign meddling in Russia's affairs. But critics are saying it's like an online iron curtain, and critics say it can be used to stifle dissent. So they had this rally in Moscow, 15,300 people, and they're saying if we do nothing, it will get worse. Actually, we need more of that sort of thing here to deal with the censorship and restrictions being imposed on our internet. So the Russians are way ahead of us on that one here. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Captain Marvel. I normally do not do entertainment news, but something very weird is going on. First of all, I want to start with the movie itself. The trailers I've seen, it's impressive CGI and not much else. And a lot of people are already concerned because the original Captain Marvel was a guy. And like we saw in that disastrous Ghostbusters movie, they decided, well, we're going to feminize it. It's time for the women to have, their superheroes. Well, whatever happened to Supergirl or Black Widow? Anyway, Tim Pool reviewed it, said it's awful. There are plot holes and bad writing. A similar review came on out, basically saying it's fun for kids, it's swill for adults, and basically condemning it as having nothing intellectually challenging. It was described as shallow as a pool of water on my sidewalk after the rain. So there we are. But on the corporate media, we're hearing, it's a great movie. Everybody loves it. And here's where it gets really interesting. Apparently, RottenTomatoes.com, which is supposed to be this grassroots film review site, has admitted to removing thousands of negative audience reviews for Captain Marvel. Now, they're blaming a bug on this, and their other defense is, well, there were just so many of these bad reviews, it had to be a bot or a troll farm. Why would anybody care? So, and here's where it gets ridiculous. Brianna Wu is calling for government legislation in response to the negative Captain Marvel reviews. They literally want a law now that you cannot give a Hollywood film a bad review online. Boy, that's just amazing here. Just amazing. Okay, getting into computers a little further here. Apparently, smart alarms left 3 million cars vulnerable to hackers who could literally not just open the cars, they could turn off the motors remotely. And they allow these potential hackers to track the vehicles, unlock the doors, cut off the engine. And apparently the vulnerabilities were exploitable with 2 simple steps. This was discovered by pen test partners who discovered the flaw. The problems are found in alarm systems made by Viper and Pandora Car Alarm System, 2 of the largest smart car alarm makers in the world. The 2 brands have as many as 3 million customers between them, and they make high-end devices that can cost thousands. And like other smart devices, smart car alarms offer people convenience. They allow owners to find their cars from a distance and unlock their doors from the phones. But apparently, criminals can get into them. Don't people test these things before they put them on the marketplace? This one is a little bit scary. We mentioned this about a week ago, where the United States government has now reapproved experiments to create a form of the bird flu, which is airborne, air transmissible, which makes it much easier to infect humans. Now, the scientists are saying they want to study the virus to protect human health so they can learn more about it and be better prepared for a pandemic. But Professor Steven Salzberg, who's a biomedical engineering expert at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, says he cannot fathom why the U.S. National Institutes of Health has permitted this research to happen. People are very concerned in 2 areas. One, what happens if they drop a beaker? And more importantly, is this going to be developed as a biological weapon? Facebook is now announcing a plan to tackle vaccine misinformation. By golly, we can't have people out there doubting the safety and efficacy of vaccines. We can't have people out there talking about, people who die from vaccines. That's going to push down the price of the pharmaceutical stocks, of which I have many in my portfolio. We really are becoming a dictatorship. Free speech, it's amazing. I briefly mentioned this story on Friday, and I want to go into it a little bit more. And it involves this PhD, Harvard immunologist, Tatiana Obukantia, and when she was getting ready to go overseas, she had to provide her vaccination record. And in looking at it, she was rather surprised to see that she'd been vaccinated for measles twice. And that was surprising to her because she remembered actually having the measles. But she's out there basically saying that the truth is unvaccinated kids are not the threat. The vaccine itself is. Anyway. Okay, looks like I did have enough time to get down here to human-caused global warming. Little story coming out of Echo Press saying, we're sick of the white stuff. It starts off saying, I've always kind of liked snow in winter, but this year is taking its toll. It seems like every day we get more snow that needs to be shoveled and put somewhere. And with all the snow piled up along the edges of the roads and walkways, I'm starting to feel like a rat trapped in a white maze. And basically goes on to describe about the fact that if he's not at work, when he's at home, it's like non-stop. He's constantly shoveling, clearing the driveway, making sure the snow isn't building up on the roof of his house. And as soon as he's done, he's got to start all over again. This has been a very, very heavy winter indeed. And it's not over. We've got another winter storm. Taylor is over the Midwest right now. So let's talk about some science and engineering stuff here. We've been talking about the InSight Mars lander and their little mole, which was the drill, was supposed to drill down something like 16 feet, and it's hit an obstacle. And it's only gone basically just a few inches. And the data is showing that the mole is at a 15-degree tilt and has hit some rock or gravel. Now, the interesting part about this, I'd commented last week about why didn't they go with a longer scoop like we had on Viking, where you can just back it out and go someplace else. It turns out that this drill was designed to get around rocky obstacles. It was designed by an instrument team in Germany. And as of right now, they've stopped the procedure to try and evaluate what's gone wrong here. Getting back on over to Boeing. Again, last week's SpaceX fabulous flight. Launch, dock with the International Space Station, re-entry, perfect landing. Looked a little like a toasted marshmallow when they fished it out of the ocean. But huzzah, huzzah. They're planning a manned flight this summer. And I think it's great that the United States can get back into low Earth orbit with manned flights again. But SpaceX is not the only one, because Boeing has their own contender, and it's called the Starliner. And they're going to fly this similar mission to the ISS called Orbital Flight Test with its CST-100 Starliner capsule. It's going to launch probably as early as next month. They're going to launch it on an Atlas V rocket and hoist it up there. They're going to take more supplies to the ISS. And it's an unmanned test flight. They're being cautious. And I wish them a lot of luck. I really do wish them a lot of luck. I find it incredibly exciting that we're finally getting back into manned space flight on our own. We're going to be right back after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. And I've received an email here correcting me about my comment about the first passenger jetliner. And he says, actually, the first jetliner to fly in 1949 was the Avro Canada C-102 jetliner. There's a photo of it flying over New York, but it's a typical Canadian story. The jetliner never reached full production, probably because when the pilots went out to fly it in Toronto in the early 50s, it had been cut in half just before the first American jetliner was to fly. Orders had been given. Not exactly sure what he's trying to say there. But I don't know if the Avro Canada was actually in commercial service or not. But I do remember that story about the de Havilland Comet. And what a tragedy that was here. But again, at that altitude, they didn't have experience. They didn't understand metal fatigue and what was going to happen. But again, Boeing stepped in with the 707. And by the way, that's the reason, even today, those windows in those jetliners are really, really small. Because the big selling point of the de Havilland Comet, the windows were large. You had an absolutely sensational view looking out that window, and that was the aircraft's downfall. All righty, over at NASA, the Kepler Space Telescope's first exoplanet candidate has been confirmed. And the reason they're using the word confirmation is very simple. The Kepler mission tries to detect exoplanets using the transit method, which are small dips in a star's brightness as planets cross in front of the star, which means if that planetary orbit is not dead on to Earth, they're probably missing a lot of planets in the process. But there are other phenomenon that can mimic transit. So each one of these Kepler findings, if you will, require further analysis to confirm that they're genuine planets here. So one of the very first planet candidates discovered by Kepler, known as Kepler 1658b, had a rocky road to confirmation. The initial estimate of the size of the planet's host star was incorrect, so the sizes of both the star and the Kepler 1658b were vastly underestimated. Then they said this has got to be a false positive because it didn't make sense what they were seeing. it's some pretty hairy mathematics out there. And I've actually read some of the journal articles on this, and I know one thing that they're all missing, and that is the gravitational lensing effect of the planet in transit, which over this distance is probably going to have an effect. It's going to take a supercomputer to calculate it. Meanwhile, over in Scotland, their EDF Energy wants to bring this nuclear reactor back online, even though it has 370 cracks. Some of them are 2 millimeters wide. And they had to shut the reactor down last March, a year ago. And now they want to basically find a way to crank it up again. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and do the Jim Goddard show up there in Vancouver. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Email, paper mail, face-to-face, bring back the art of the conversation. At this point, Google, Facebook, Twitter are a total waste of time unless your entire universe is made up of funny cat videos. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.